All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. We have a few things to cover this morning, and then we'll get you guys started with your day and your week. Hopefully, peak season all went well, and you guys were able to do a great job and do it safely. And now that it's kind of quieting back down, we can get back to focusing on the details and getting back to the basics. Today, what I wanted to cover, or Zinnia asked me to cover, was everyone should have received last Monday some meetings or in your safety app on your phones. There's probably about 12 or 13 different policies that line up with Lugmo Corp as well as with FedEx, and we want to try to cover those items just because it's best practices not just for FedEx, but also most of these are for DOT industry specific as well. So it's not so much that it's something that we're just having you do, but it's also DOT standards as well. So we'll go through these really quick, just kind of give you some high level information about it, some overviews, and then we'll continue to go on. Number one, from a company standpoint, the company is committed to safety, and all employees are responsible for adhering to all local, state, and federal laws, especially when it pertains to driving, as well as your personal record as well in regards to not getting any misdemeanors or felonies. One thing we see common in today's society is issues surrounding domestic violence or any type of incidents at home and stuff like that. DUIs are common where it'll show up on not only your driving record, but also can hit your record as well, and cause some issues in regards to your employment status. So just keep that in mind. Not only is your license important, but also maintaining a clean background as well. The next one, just drug and alcohol testing. Everyone is familiar with that. Obviously, Department of Transportation requires all companies to have random drug testing. Obviously you do your normal drug testing when you get hired, but there's also has to be a process in place for randoms, which I'm sure, at some point each driver over the years will get pulled into a random from FedEx. And you have 2 hours once they present the paperwork to you to go and present yourself at a clinic and give the sample, and that gets tested. So always important. Never skip those. Never try to avoid those. Not going or not going in a timely manner will also indicate or come back as a positive test. Those are very hard to try to overturn. Also with medications, if you're taking medications that pop up on a drug test, you must have a doctor's note that shows that you're supposed to be taking certain medications that could pop up on a drug test. We talked about the license, making sure your license is current at all times. Maintaining your license is probably number one in this business. You just want to make sure you keep that current. Vehicle inspections, something you're supposed to do every single day, pre-trips and post-trip inspections. There's about 15 different items that should be covered when you're inspecting your tractors and your trailers every single day. Also, after you stop and have a break throughout the day, it's good to do a walk around of the vehicle just to make sure it wasn't tampered with, especially at truck stops and stuff like that. You never know if people have bad intentions, unhook your air hoses or, mess around with your truck, when you're gone or inside. Always just, be overly cautious with that. The next one is non-approved passengers. Be very careful with this, especially when you're pulling FedEx equipment or trailers with packages on it. Having somebody in the vehicle that's not approved, even if it's a wife, a husband, a child, anybody that's not approved with FedEx, that hasn't went through background checks, that hasn't completed the new hire process, they are not allowed to be in the truck. And this is not just a FedEx thing. This is a DOT thing as well. It can be very dangerous in a lot of aspects, from safety to security. To be hauling or having someone in a truck that is not approved could be very, very, very bad. So just be careful with that. Even when you're off duty, you don't want to have visitors or any type of people inside the tracker is not approved. With Lugmo as well as with FedEx, it could become a big problem. The next one is reporting injuries or accidents. You always want to report an injury or an accident in a timely manner. Failing to report accidents or injuries can cause not only disqualification, but is also another huge problem for insurance purposes as well. You want to make sure whether you think you're at fault or not, or no matter how small or minor the incident may be, always report that to your management team, just because there has to be made records and notes of those types of incidents that potentially could occur out there. Like most of you may be aware, there are items in FedEx's contract that we're required to follow in regards to criminal offenses, like we mentioned, in regards to felonies and misdemeanors. Then there's just some zero tolerance items that FedEx has that put in place that they will not tolerate. One of, in terms of those zero tolerance things, is you know, any type of threats or violence at the station, any type of sexual harassment of fellow drivers, customers, employees at FedEx at the stations. Be very mindful of those types of things when you're there. And you're around and maintain a high level of professionalism at all times. A couple other points to that is operating a vehicle knowingly having your license suspended or it's expired. We see this commonly with situations where maybe child support or stuff like that pops up and your license gets suspended and you're not clear to be driving. So just be careful with that type of stuff. You never want to knowingly drive and your license is not active. Falsifying any safety related documents. That particular item, safety related documents, has to do with your pre-trip inspections, primarily your logs. Obviously, it's kind of hard to do that with electronic logs, but one thing I've noticed at FedEx for many years is drivers not doing the pre-trips inspections. And then what happens is, the safety department is out in the yard, they're doing inspections, they see bald tires on a truck, and then they look at the pre-trip inspection from the previous day and there's no defects noted. So always notate your defects, whatever the process might be in place for Lugmo in terms of reporting that to Ruben or to Xenia. Make sure you do that, but also make notes of that. You don't want to be driving a vehicle that is unsafe to do so. So yeah, those are a couple things to remember in regards to some of the zero tolerance items. Vehicle security. I know we've talked about this, especially last year, just making sure that when you exit the vehicle, it's secure at all times. Making sure you're wearing your seatbelt while you're driving and you're in the vehicle for obvious reasons. Roadside inspections. I'm sure you guys have all been involved in those, especially when you go to scales, making sure that you do your part in keeping FedEx's CSA score down, as well as you not getting CSA points taken or on your record as well. If you don't know, there's, you can pull up a driver's name and figure out all the points or issues or violations they've had from a roadside inspection standpoint. So always inspect your vehicle. Keep it well maintained. One of the first triggers to an inspection is how the vehicle looks on the outside. If the vehicle's dirty, if there's cans and bottles all in the windshield, it tends to strike the officer's attention even more, and it makes them want to look under the hood, do a full inspection. So just maintaining a professional image while you're in the truck, even outside of the truck too as well. So keep those kind of things in mind. And always one of the other big ones too is your dolly coupling, making sure your tractors or your trailers are fully hooked up and connected, doing the pull test. Obviously, we all know about any type of rollaways or disconnects can lead to disqualifications, and you always want to make sure that you go above and beyond and checking to make sure those are secured before you pull off. It could be a very dangerous incident or accident that could occur. And lastly, solo and team runs. This is also always a huge issue across the country. when you're on a assigned team run, making sure that there's two drivers in the truck when you dispatch, as well as when you arrive at the station, that there's two drivers with two FedEx IDs. Because if you dispatch and you dispatch that truck and it's supposed to be a team run, it's only one driver. It looks like an integrity issue. It looks like a lot of things could potentially be going on with that. Be very, very careful with doing stuff like that, because you're essentially trying to hoodwink the system. You're trying to play with hours of service, and you don't want to get involved in nothing like that. From an integrity standpoint, it's easily a disqualifiable offense. Like we mentioned earlier, in regards to falsifying a safety-related document, that would include something like that as well. So just be mindful of that. It's always been a huge issue at FedEx all across the country. Drivers getting popped for that. Be very mindful of that. If it's a team run and it's supposed to be two drivers, there should be two drivers when you dispatch and when you arrive at your destination station. Any questions?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. A couple other things I wanted to just kind of quickly mention as well. We talked about the appearance and keeping the inside of the vehicles clean, and obviously, when you're traveling with multiple drivers in there, having the respect for your co-driver. But using the restroom inside the truck, not only is it not a great idea to do from a sanitary situation, but also just from a safety standpoint. It's just not a professional thing to do. Keep that in mind. It's not something that you want to, some habits you want to practice while you're driving. Pull over, rest stop wherever you can. But using the restroom inside the tractor is just not a good idea for all the way across the board. And then especially those bottles being left in the truck is very unsanitary, very unsafe, and it can cause a lot of issues from a health perspective as well. And the last thing, just make sure that with the cameras, if you guys don't know, if you're ever involved in an accident, FedEx requests the video from that accident. They request, I think it's about 15 to 16 seconds prior to the accident, as well as 15 to 16 seconds after the accident, to try to get a good understanding of whether and determine whether the accident was preventable or non-preventable. In the trucking industry, I know a lot of times we use the words at fault and not at fault, but in the trucking industry, they use the words preventable and non-preventable. It's totally two different things. They essentially mean the same thing, but they're subtly different, because preventable has to do more with, could the driver avoid these accidents, not so much was he at fault. Could you have done more to prevent an accident versus I got hit, or I wasn't at fault. So just keep that in mind. As a truck, a Class A, truck driver with a Class A license, you're held to a way higher standard than the regular normal driving public. And those that are driving cars or have regular license, they use the verbiage of at fault or not at fault. Typically what an insurance company would utilize, that type of language. But in the trucking industry, it's preventable and non-preventable. So just keep that in mind as you're driving, you're being defensive out there. The question is always going to be, could you have done more to avoid an incident or avoid an accident? And that's if there was something, or if it is determined that you could have done something differently, then that incident will come back preventable. All right, so just keep that kind of stuff in mind. It's a lot of the stuff that we covered is stuff that you already know, but as we start the new year off, you get back to the basics and just fine tuning the operation, keeping our minds focused on the big picture, and continue to be as safe as possible out there. Zian, do you have anything else for us?
Excuse me, I have a question.
Yeah.
So I recently just started driving, and I noticed that here in the state of California, they have some signs that say that they have aircraft units that are like monitoring your speed.
Right.
How is that actually something that they do? Like, how frequently does that happen? Like, what's the percentage of people who get tickets from aircrafts in comparison with people who get tickets with just a police officer on the road?
You know, I've never even heard of anyone getting a ticket from an aircraft. I know the signage is there, but I think it's more so of if an aircraft does catch someone speeding, I think it notifies CHP to.
Wait, you cut off. I wasn't able to hear you.
Oh, I was saying that I don't actually believe that the aircraft will give you a ticket. I think it's monitoring speed, and then it'll notify CHP to try to track you down. Any more questions?
Hey, Aaron, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I don't think that we have more questions. The other thing that I want to make sure is that they visit, that everybody goes and visit the app, the Safety Compliance and Solution app, and they acknowledge that they reviewed all the policies and procedures. In that way, everybody start the year with the right feet. And then the other thing is I sent them a driver certification form through their phones for them to sign and let me know if they have taken, hopefully not, a ticket or citation or something has happened during this year, because FedEx will run MVRs between, I think it's around the end of January, beginning of February, and I want to make sure that they know firsthand from us, not that they catch us and then they come back and ding us because of that. So if you please can go and complete the driver certification. If you don't have any ticket, nothing to report, just put a line and sign and return to me. I can print it at home. If you need a hard copy, let me know so I can drop a hard copy in the tractor for you, in the truck for you. And also, during this quarter, we're gonna start doing again the informal and formal observations. So get ready, because we're gonna start looking at the cameras more frequent and talking to you about what we're seeing, the behaviors we're seeing. And somebody will be running with you guys for the formal observation as well. And we just want to say more than words can say. We are very, very grateful for the hard work everybody did during this peak season. Was incident, accident free, so we want to keep it like that. Now it's coming the snow and the stormy weather with the ice. So please keep safe on mind since you put the vest on when you step on the yard. And I think that will be all in my part.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate it.
Have a good day.